Next speaker, Andrew.
According to the United States government, there has been over 13,000 people legally executed. What I will be informing you about will be the United States death penalty system. At first, I will begin to talk about the origin and why it came into place. I will then go over about the overall cost of the death penalty and what it means to us. And then lastly, I will begin to discuss to you on whether if it's really a crime deterrent. So when did it all start? According to Hugo Badua in the book of Debating the Death Penalty, it has been said that the first legal recorded execution was back in 1608 in Virginia's Jamestown colony. His name was George Kendall. George Kendall was hanged due to the crime of spying for the Spanish. In the next few years, there has been an uncounted number, possibly 20,000 or more, of convicted murderers, rapists, horse thieves, spies, witches, kidnappers who also met a similar fate. The colonists at the time really embraced the death penalty. It was a means to truly control an unruly public. They would use other methods such as flogging and branding as punishment for other crimes. However, during the Revolutionary era, there has been some political forces of outcry to change the system of the death penalty. So according to Badal, once again, in 1973, Pennsylvania was the first state to divide the murder into two categories, first and second degree murder. In order to be convicted of the death penalty, you would need first degree murder. First degree was often defined to include both premeditated murder and felony murder. First degree murder was often defined that is killing of any committing another felony, such as arson, burglary, rape, or robbery. In 1934, the state of New York was the first to adopt the reform of ending public executions regarding the death penalty. Soon, other states such as Pennsylvania and New Jersey followed. Public executions normally would bring in huge crowds as people like to watch it as a sport or just out of curiosity. As much as 20,000 people would appear at some public executions. So what is the cost to run the death penalty in today's time? The cost of the death penalty, well, there's many factors. According to Michael Burkhead in A Life for Death, the death penalty cases are more expensive at every stage of the judicial process than a capital case. Everything that you would use for an ordinary trial is needed, plus much more. You would need more time to prepare the case. Typically, it can take up to a year before your case goes into trial. You would need more experts, about twice as many attorneys for the defense and prosecutions. Jurors will be questioned and interviewed more. 2 trials instead of 1 will be conducted, 1 for the guilt and 1 for the punishment. Thus, the trial overall takes a lot more time than a regular trial. A study at the Duke University estimated that the death penalty trial takes 3 to 5 times longer than a typical murder trial. Now, as we all know, time is money. This case, in Texas, the death penalty on average cost $2.3 million. In North Carolina, it cost $2.16. In the state of New York, it was estimated to cost $23 million. In Maryland, taxpayers have paid at least $37.2 million for each case of execution. In our state of California, since a few of the death row inmates actually be executed, taxpayers have paid more than $250 million for each of the state's execution. That's a lot of money. So how is it crime deterrent? Well, let's look at some of the criminal history of who get the sentence to death. In 1994, by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, it was shown that 67% of all prisoners under the sentence of death had a previous felony conviction. About 9% were homicide convictions. In one instance of study, it was shown that 1 out of every 5 murderers who were released in the 1970s was returned to prison for some cause or another. Another study conducted in 1983 that all of the state's convicted murderers released, 6.6% of the murderers returned to prison within 3 years for another murder, 2.8% returned on a rape conviction, 2.9% for robbery, and 17% for assault. Another study conducted in 1987 by the Bureau of Statistics showed that over 70% of the people who have been released from the death penalty have been rearrested. In other words, if the person is sentenced to death, they cannot by any possible means recommit a crime. Whether this is a good explanation or percentage to support this or not is irrelevant. And right here I have a graph that shows the 2006 murder rate of the top 12 executing states compared to the 2006 murder rate of the non-death penalty states. And to my surprise, the states that have the death penalty actually have a higher murder rate than overall of the states that do not have the death penalty. So, that is the United States death penalty system. I informed you briefly on some of the main points regarding the system here in the United States. I firstly talked about its origin and how it came into place. I then talked about its overall costs of the system. And then lastly, I briefly discussed some of the figures of statistics regarding the death penalty and the crime deterrent. And that's the end of my speech. Thank you.